Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope that 2018 has been good to you so far. Although we're not that far into it, my start of the year has been okay. Other than the fact that my husband has had to go back to work officially, and so it's me and three kids, and one of them being a small infant, and I'm just going to be learning how to do that, I guess, for this month of January. So that's pretty much how my year's starting out, is just finally getting on my own and taking care of these kids by myself all day, of course, until he gets home. So that's my quick life update. That's what's been going on with me so far. But today I just wanted to share my favorite fiction books that I read in 2017. 2017 was a great reading year for me. I surpassed my reading goal that I set for myself on Goodreads. I had it set for 50 books, and I think, if I remember correctly, I read 62. So that's pretty good. I am perfectly happy with that, especially since my reading really slowed down there for a while when I was feeling really sick during the first half of my pregnancy. So I was really happy with the year, and I'm just going to get into the books that I read that I loved. And the books that I picked, I didn't set out to pick a certain number. I just picked ones that I still think about, even now that we're into 2018. Books that stuck with me and that I would wholeheartedly recommend to anyone to read. I don't always, tell people like, hey, you should read this book, because I realize that my tastes are sometimes really specific to me. And so there's some books that I don't insist, or bug people about that they should read, but these are ones that I would encourage everyone to read. I would risk you not enjoying it just so you can say that you've read it and give me some feedback. I want more people to read these particular books. So that was kind of like my criteria for picking them out as well for my favorites, because I didn't want to do a whole stack. But let me just get into them now. And they're not in any particular order, but my first favorite of 2017 was City of Thieves by David Benioff, and I adored this book. I didn't think it was going to end up a favorite for me. Maybe, is it better if I hold it this way? I'm used to holding my book over here, I think, so it just makes more sense, but I'll hold it over here. I didn't think that I was going to love this book as much as I did. I actually bought this for Christmas for my husband last year, and I ended up reading it before him. It was one of those where it's a small book. I mean, it's not anything too hefty. I think it's like 250 pages maybe. But it was one of those where within the first 2 chapters I was completely hooked, completely engrossed in the story, and then just kind of torn apart a little at the end. The characters were written beautifully, even for a shorter book. I think when an author can write a shorter book but still get you completely engrossed in the characters' lives, that author knows what they're doing, and that makes the book a total winner. This was a historical fiction set during the siege of Leningrad, and it was a beautifully written book with beautiful characters, and I totally love them. And I think that I would recommend this to just about anyone, just because it is a shorter read. And even, I think this one was a good one to show me that even though it was about something I'd never even heard of or knew about, the siege of Leningrad, or even thought I would be interested in reading that, it was one of those I was glad that I picked it up and decided to give it a chance. And it showed me that I could be interested in things that I didn't think I would be interested in, to put it plainly. Okay. So, the next favorite book that I read this year was Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with this now, especially since it's a show on Hulu, which I still have not watched. I'm dying to watch it, but I have to pay for it at this point, and I just don't want to pay to watch a show. Wait, I don't know. Is Hulu free? I don't know. We just don't have it, and that's why I haven't watched it. Unless it's on Amazon Prime or Netflix, I don't get to watch it until it is there. Yeah, this is a book that I definitely think everyone should read. I would recommend it to anyone, just to see what you can get from it. It took me by surprise. I knew it had to be popular for a reason, but just because a book is popular doesn't mean that you're going to like it. Even if a book is a classic, it doesn't mean that you have to like it, or you're not strange or missing something because you don't. But this was one of those where it hit the spot, and I was glad that I read this and gave it a chance, because it was very enjoyable. And part of the reason it was very enjoyable is because I could see the stuff in here happening today or in the future. I can see what would lead people to do this. It was one of those books where it kind of makes you realize that the impossible can actually happen. So it's one to get you thinking. I really enjoyed it for that reason. The next book that I read in 2017 and would recommend to anyone is The Plague Dogs by Richard Adams. And if you're not familiar with Richard Adams as an author, he wrote Watership Down, which I actually read at the end of 2016, and I just loved it. It's now one of my top 5 favorite novels of all time. So I loved Watership Down, so I had to pick up The Plague Dogs. And this was a dark little story, and I guess not terribly little, but it was a dark little story about 2 dogs who escape from an animal research facility, and it's all written from their perspective. But I think what I like about some books that are written from an animal's perspective is it really kind of gives you a look into human behavior as well. And it was one of those books that did that. It was pretty dark. It was a pretty dark book, but I really enjoyed it. And just to get your mind flowing, in different directions, it's just a book that's good for that. And I would recommend it and hope that most people would give it a try. So I really enjoyed this. Definitely had moments in it that squeezed at me, squeezed at my heart and made me feel tense and kind of sick to my stomach, and I like when a book can do that. So for that reason, this was one of my top reads of 2017. Now, another one that I actually don't have on me, but I wanted to make sure and mention, was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I checked that one out from the library, and if you've read it or you've seen the book at all, then you know that it's a very short story. It almost is like a short story instead of a book. I think it was 120 pages, 150 tops. Very quick read. I read it all in one day, but it was a small book that packed a really powerful punch to it, and that's why I liked it. It really, it got the juices flowing. I was reading it as quickly as I could so I could find out what would happen. And then, of course, the ending it was something. Let's just put it that way. And it's just one that just has stuck out in my mind just because it was such a powerfully written story in such, a small amount. And you just don't think that's going to be possible, but I still think about it now. It's one of those that stuck out in my mind from the past year. So I wanted to, put that one out there too and mention that book as well. All right, and then to round out my year, my top favorite books that I read for the entire year of 2017, I saved this one for last for a very specific reason, and that reason is because it is now my number 1 all-time favorite book. I think I read it last January, so January or February 2017. I read it, and it just, by the time I got to the end of it, it became my new all-time favorite book. And my all-time favorite book hadn't changed in years, but this one nudged itself into the top spot, and I don't think anything will ever be able to hold a candle to it. I'm just saying. But that book is The Fox and the Hound by Daniel P. Mannix. I think I did a whole video where, maybe not a whole video, but a pretty good portion of one video where I just gushed about this book. And for all these books, I've talked about them more in depth, and I can link those videos below where I talk about each book in case you want to know more about it or are curious to hear more of my thoughts on them. So I'm not going to go too deep into this, but this is my new all-time favorite book. And if the title sounds familiar at all, it's because it is a Disney movie, or Disney, I guess, got inspired by this book and made a movie, although I would say the book and the movie are very, very different. This is a dark, dark book. It is a gut-wrenching book. It is just, it is gritty and raw and real, and there's no fluffy cotton candy farts in here. I mean, cotton candy uniform farts in here. I don't know how to put it except for it's gritty, raw, real, and dirty. And yeah, I loved this book so much. Just at the end of this book, when I got done reading it, I felt raw. I felt raw inside from reading this book, as if it'd just been scraping the walls of my chest, and I was just left raw and bleeding inside after reading this book. Emotionally, I was raw and bleeding. So basically, yeah, the best book of all time. I would definitely highly, highly recommend it. I want everyone to read this book. I don't care if you read it and didn't like it. I just think it should be read. I have no idea why it is not still printed. FYI, the book is not still being printed, so the only way you can read it is to buy a vintage copy, which are hard to come by, or read it as an ebook or on an e-reader or Kindle or your phone or whatever, which of course can be bought cheaply off of Amazon. So yeah, I would definitely recommend everyone read that book. It just, when I talk about it, it just ignites something in me, and that's how I knew it was going to be my new favorite book, and it is, and I just adore it. But that rounds out the books that I read that were my favorite for 2017. But I did want to briefly mention a new favorite author, and that is Liane Moriarty. I actually haven't read this book yet, but my new favorite author is Liane Moriarty. I have just really enjoyed her books. I discovered them this past fall, and I think I've read 3 of them maybe so far, and I've enjoyed every single one that I've read, and I want to read more. I just like her style of writing. I like the storylines that she comes up with, and I like how real and human that her characters are. So I just wanted to mention her really quick and just kind of put that in a general group of some of my favorite books have been some of hers that I've read. But yeah, that was my 2017 fiction favorites or what have you, and ones I would want to share with the world that I've read from this past year. If I had to mark my year in books, those are the ones that I definitely want to remember 2017 by. But yeah, if you have any thoughts about any of these books, or if you've read them especially, I would love to hear about it. And come back and tell me if you do read them, and then what you thought of them. Like if you hated it or loved it, or maybe you thought I was crazy for loving any particular book that I've mentioned. I would like to hear about it, because, you know, I mean, we're all different, and I rejoice in that. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and as I mentioned before, I'll link some videos below where I talked about these more in depth. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again really soon.